Hi, everyone. My name is Beverly, and I'm here with the Writing Hub at the Teaching and Learning Commons at UC San Diego. And this workshop is going to be a guide to the NSF GRFP. And so the plan for the workshop is the following. So first we'll review what is the NSF GRFP. So if you're not familiar or just curious to see what this opportunity for graduate funding entails, we'll do a brief overview of what the NSF GRFP is. For those of you who are familiar, who are perhaps writing your statements now or in the process of applying for the NSF GRFP this year, I do recommend that you pay attention to parts of this section because it may reinforce some of the priorities of the National Science Foundation that you'll want to pay attention to when you're writing your proposal. We'll then go into a discussion about aligning intentions and persuasively connecting to the funder. And so these are general principles that are useful for grant writing in any context. So you can take this to anything either through the NSF GRFP or outside to other graduate funding opportunities. But we'll talk a little bit about what we mean here because this is something important to consider as you're writing your statements. So we'll talk about how to be a steward of a grant funder's intentions and how to align those intentions authentically. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, please don't worry. We'll talk about what this means in depth a little bit later on. Then we'll go over a review of the statements of the NSF GRFP in detail. So there's really two statements that are sort of the meat of the NSF GRFP application. These are the personal statement. NSF does not call this the personal statement. They call this personal statement, relevant background, and future goals. But essentially what it is a personal statement. And then we'll cover the research statement component next. There will be a link or a resources worksheet, which has some of these resources for reviewing sample statements that you can look at and see how other people have approached the NSF GRFP. And so I provide this so that you can look at this from a critical reader and writer's perspective and see how you think or whether you think these statements were effective in doing the sorts of things that we'll be talking about in the workshop. In the synchronous group, we did breakout groups for several different sets of people because I imagine there are about 3 audiences watching this workshop. Those who are not really familiar with NSF GRFP and just want to know more about it. Those who do know what the NSF GRFP is and are planning on applying in future years, but don't necessarily have their statements figured out or written yet. And a third group of individuals who have already written their NSF statements and want to see how they're aligning their statements with the funder's goals and hoping for some additional advice. So we covered all of these 3 groups in breakout groups. And so for this asynchronous portion, I'm going to be talking about a guide to effective peer review. So how you can elicit effective peer review from individuals that you want to look over your statements perhaps, or how you as a friend or colleague can look over other individuals' NSF GRFP proposals. There will also be resources provided for you on the resources sheet, including additional NSF example proposals, both the research and the personal statements, as well as some resources to additional resources from the NSF that I think are important to review, particularly if you're new and figuring out what the NSF GRFP is. We'll then do a brief little bit of wrap up, talk about what's next, what other resources the Writing Hub offers for you as you're working through the NSF GRFP. So we do not anticipate that this workshop is a once and done. As soon as you go through this, you're all finished and ready to go. So we'll actually talk about what other things you can then do moving forward that we have going on all year round in the Writing Hub. There'll be a link to workshop feedback, and I'll just take a moment here, even in the asynchronous section, to really ask that you please provide us with feedback on the workshop. We are hoping to offer this workshop again in either the winter or spring quarter. And your feedback is very much appreciated, and we'll use that feedback to essentially make a better workshop that suits your needs. And then there won't be an opportunity for questions since this is asynchronously recorded, but if you do have questions, please feel free to talk to a graduate writing consultant at the Writing Hub or an undergraduate writing consultant if you are an undergraduate. So the NSF GRFP. So what is this? So we're going to do a brief overview. So there's a lot of acronyms and sort of alphabet soup happening here. So what is the NSF? The NSF is the National Science Foundation, which is an independent federal agency that was created in 1950. And the mission statement of the NSF Foundation is the following. The mission is to promote the progress of science, to advance national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure the national defense. The NSF funds approximately 20 to 27%, depending on the year, of all federally supported research in America's colleges and universities. So it's a really major funding body for basic science research. And so for more detail, I definitely recommend going to this link or following this link that I've listed here. There are sections about the NSF, NSF at a glance, and NSF in more detail. And if you are writing an NSF GRFP, I do recommend that you at least glance over these or skim over these, and we'll talk a little bit later about why that's important. But it's really important to get a sense of what your funders or your potential funders' missions and values and goals are. So what is the GRFP? So the GRFP is NSF's Graduate Research Fellowship Program. The overall goal of the NSF GRFP is to recruit individuals into STEM fields. And the NSF lists two additional main goals that they have. So the two main goals are to select, recognize, and financially support individuals who have the potential to be high-achieving scientists and engineers early in their careers. And the second main goal is to broaden participation in science and engineering of underrepresented groups, including veterans, minorities, women, and persons with disabilities. And so if you are awarded the NSF GRFP, what is it? So how do they carry out their mission of facilitating participation in STEM fields? So the GRFP provides a 5-year award that is worth a total of $138,000. So you as an awardee or as a grantee will receive a stipend for 3 years of your graduate education, which is currently set at $34,000 a year. So the NSF revisits this periodically, and typically what they try to do is have a stipend that is usually a little bit higher than the national average for a graduate program. The institution that you are receiving your graduate degree from then receives $12,000 as an educational allowance to cover tuition and fees. So in some cases, your institution will then waive the tuition and fees that are required of you to attend as a graduate student. That also provides you access to additional professional development opportunities. So there are two main ones. There's the NSF GROW and the NSF GRIP. And the GROW is for conducting international research projects with universities or partner laboratories in different countries. The NSF GRIP is an internship program. It's an opportunity to conduct an internship with a federal partner agency or laboratory of NSF. And so these typically provide additional funding to pursue these opportunities, and it's something that you can only apply for if you have received the NSF GRFP. The GRFP also provides access to a supercomputer through the XSEED program. So if a supercomputer is something that you think you need for your work or you know that you'll need for your work, the NSF can help you with access to the supercomputer. And it also provides a career life balance program, essentially a family leave, including up to 3 months salary support. And they say even potentially the help of a qualified technician who can help conduct some in-person laboratory research for you if for reasons of family leave, you cannot be there in person to conduct family or to conduct research for those 3 months while you're on family leave. And so are there some unique features of the GRFP that make it a little different from other graduate funding opportunities that you might be familiar with? So most importantly, and this is the NSF's words, the GRFP awards people, not projects. And so that means a couple things. So this means essentially that the award is flexible. So after you receive the award, even though you've been asked to list a potential project advisor and program, you can then decide and you can change the project advisor and the program. It also means that the award is portable, so you can conduct research at any accredited US institution as long as you work towards a graduate degree in STEM. This can be either a master's degree or a PhD, but you can take this and conduct your graduate education at any accredited US nonprofit institution. So there are some rules for eligibility. There are some restrictions on this award. So in order to be eligible for this award, you do have to be a US citizen, national, or permanent resident. You must be early on in your STEM career. So either a senior undergraduate or typically early graduate student. You must be pursuing a research-based master's or doctoral degrees. The NSF GRFP does not fund professional degrees, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. It must be within the realm of STEM or STEM education, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And after you receive the award, you must enroll full-time in a graduate degree program at an accredited nonprofit US institution of higher education. There are several academic levels of eligibility too that you can then be grouped in or who are eligible to apply for the NSF GRFP. So the first level are undergraduate seniors and baccalaureates who have never enrolled in a graduate degree program. Level 2 are first year graduate students who are in their first graduate degree program or currently enrolled joint bachelor master students who have completed 3 years in a joint program. Level 3 is second year graduate students, no more than one academic year completed in the first graduate degree program, or current first year doctoral students who went directly into a doctoral program after completing a joint bachelor's and master's degree and did not apply during the joint degree program. Level 4 of those who are eligible are those returning graduate students who've had a greater than 2-year interruption in graduate study. They may have a master's degree but cannot have a doctorate degree or greater than one academic year in a graduate program, and they must not be enrolled in a graduate program at the application deadline. And so there are several fields of study that are supported by the NSF GRFP. So it's worth looking at this because I think sometimes this is not widely advertised for all of the groups that are eligible to be supported by the NSF GRFP. So the NSF GRFP will support chemistry, those who are for computer and information science and engineering, geosciences, life sciences, materials research, mathematical sciences, physics and astronomy, psychology, social sciences, and STEM education. And there are several fields or types of degrees that are then not supported by the NSF GRFP. So these would be joint science professional degree programs, things like MD PhDs or JD PhDs, business administration or management, counseling, social work, education, with the exception of education specifically for science and engineering, history, except in the case of history of science, biomedical research for which goals are directly health or disease related, or clinical research or health policy research. So it's always helpful, I think, to get advice from your mentors or from your potential advisors, or even reach out to the NSF GRFP through their contact information on the website to find out if the graduate work that you are pursuing or considering pursuing is something that is covered by the NSF GRFP. Because it can be a little heartbreaking if you've been putting in time and energy in pursuing writing, working on these sort of challenging statements, only then to find out that you should be applying under a different agency, such as the NIH. So there are a different number of rules for the number of times that you can apply depending on your academic level. So level 1, which again are those current undergraduate students or students who already have their bachelor's degrees, they can apply every year until they're enrolled in the graduate degree program. If, however, they're awarded a fellowship, they must enroll in an eligible graduate degree program by fall. For level 2, 3, or 4, the academic levels, graduate students can only apply once. So it's important to think about when you are applying, because you can only apply once. And all groups can only submit one application per person per annual competition. So you couldn't submit to both chemistry and history of science, for instance. So this is a typical timeline for the NSF GRFP, but do check the current solicitation because this depends on the year. But typically what happens is in July or August, the solicitation from the NSF is posted. Then in mid to late October, depending on the year, applications are due, and this is different for different subfields. In late October, early November, reference letters are due, and then there'll be a period of time where you just have to wait. And then in March and April, recipients and honorable mentions are announced. In May, typically May 1st, you must declare your fellowship status and either accept or decline the award. And then you can start your fellowship in June or September following the May in which you accept the award and declare your fellowship status. So there are five components for a complete application package. So part 1 is going to be a bit of personal information, education, your background and work and research experience, your proposed major field of study, and any honors, awards, presentations, or publications that you may have. And this is submitted through the NSF Fast Lane system online. And then there are the 2 statements, which again, I said are sort of the meat of the NSF GRFP application. There's the personal relevant background and future goals statement, which sometimes I will shorten to the personal statement, which is 3 pages long, and then a graduate research statement, which is 2 pages long, although always check the current solicitation because this will change, exact requirements will change based on year. You do have to submit your transcripts electronically, and you also have to provide letters of reference. 2 letters of reference are mandatory, 3 are recommended. You may submit up to 5 letters of reference, but then you will be asked to rank them and only the first 3 will be read. So one thing that's really important that I want to highlight is to read the solicitation and review the solicitation. So in the synchronous session, we took some time to review the solicitation because the NSF says that every year applications are rejected because they haven't followed the guidelines detailed in the solicitation. It's a very long document, but it's worth printing out and just highlighting and working through everything to make sure you're not missing any of your application components. And so what I've done here is include the link to the current GRF program solicitation. So do check this out no matter what stage in the application process of the NSF GRFP you are at. And so at this point, I wanted everyone to take a step back and talk about why these opportunities exist. And this will help inform our writing process and how you then approach these applications and writing these statements. So the aim of essentially any graduate funding opportunity is to fund, and this is actually true for most funding opportunities, is to fund students who the funders believe will be stewards of their intentions. And so what does that mean? So every fellowship opportunity ultimately represents the intentions of its funders. That's why it exists. So individuals and organizations will seek to distribute resources to further their mission and values. And so this principle holds for private foundations, things like the Ford Fellowship, for public agencies such as the NSF, and university offices, units, and departments such as the Office of the UC President. So in all of these cases, there are funders and organizations who have certain missions and values. And the reason they have these opportunities is because they would like to distribute resources for others to further their mission and values in the world. So what this means for applicants is that you are entering as the applicant into a rhetorical situation. So that is, this is a circumstance or an occasion for communication where you must persuasively connect with your reader in order to move them from where they're starting off now to a particular understanding or point of view. So when when you are trying to, as a writer, persuasively connect with your reader, you have to do this sort of balancing act. And there's a really fine line between connecting with your reader and writing what you think that they want to hear. And it's really hard, in particular, for these opportunities and for things like the NSF GRFP, where you don't know who your reviewers are going to be. These are not people that you're meeting with to interview. Your only connection point to them is through your application. But this actually lets you off the hook a little bit because you know that you cannot know who your audience is or can't know everything about who these people are. You can stop stressing about who they are and stop stressing about the picture you have in your head about the kind of person they are looking for, and instead refocus on what you can control, which is thinking carefully about the intentions of this funding opportunity, including why it exists, why the organization started this opportunity and continues to fund it, and then thinking carefully about yourself as a steward of those intentions, and then presenting yourself, your work, and your aspirations authentically. Focusing on crafting writer responsible text. And so this means statements that are easy to follow and enjoyable to read is something you can control and something that you should focus on. And so I have a couple guidelines for what your aim is not and what your aim is in the situation where you're trying to persuasively connect to this audience that you don't really know who they are or who is on the other side of reading your applications. So your aim is not to convince your reader that you are smart or accomplished, although I bet all of you are. Your aim is not to also to show off all your impressive achievements, although I'm sure you have many, or to convince your reader that you have everything figured out, or to convince your reader that you're the most qualified applicant they've ever seen. And the reason this is because each audience or reviewer will have certain biases or images in their head, perhaps, for what they count as the most qualified applicant. But there is no perfect combination of words or perfect combinations of experiences um, that will put you in this position for every person. And so, what you can do instead, and what makes a successful application, is to authentically present yourself in these situations. But I understand that this is very hard to do. So we'll talk a little bit about strategies for doing this and also focus on the positives. So your aim instead, what your aim is to do is to demonstrate that you understand their intentions, to align your written accounts, so your personal and or research statements with their intentions, and to offer a curated retelling of experiences and or proposal of research that would be relevant for this audience. And so what we do know about this audience is that they are likely individuals that are somehow invested in the NSF GRFP. So these could be individuals who were supported by an NSF GRFP early on in their career. They could be PIs who believe in the mission and the values of the NSF GRFP for broadening participation in STEM. Or they just could be any expert in the field of STEM who has some interest in providing opportunities of funding for the next generation of high achieving scientists and engineers. And so there's a couple ways that you can do this. So in order to follow this yes list, so in order to demonstrate that you understand their intentions or the funder's intentions, what you can control and do is to research the agency and the program to detect their values. And this takes a little bit of time. And so that's part of another reason why I recommend looking at the solicitation and looking and really conducting research on the agency and the program to figure out what the values of the funder is and how you can align with those values. Then this leads us very well into aligning your written accounts, so your personal and or research statements with the intentions of the funder. This can help you determine the major themes that could anchor your statements. And in order to offer this curated retelling of experiences that's relevant for this audience, you can think about reconsidering, potentially reorganizing, or retelling your personal and research stories to incorporate and address those major themes that you've determined could anchor your statement and align with the values of the agency and the program. So here's a schematic from the Writing Hub for aligning with intentions, or how you can think about it. So we have these different levels or these different circles. We have at the largest level, we have the agency. Inside of that, we have the fellowship. Inside of that, we have your researches and experiences. And inside of that, we have you. So the agency will include the purpose of the agency, its mission, and its historic funding models and other programs or areas of their work. The fellowship, or the intentions of the fellowship, are the role that this program plays in the agency's broader mission, as well as the history of the program and the basis for selection, and the intended impacts of the program on recipients, because this fellowship exists for a reason. And so part of your job is to figure out why this exists. Within that, we have your intentions. So these are the aspects of your experiences, aspirations, and research that connect to the program or agency. And then inside all of this, we have you, which is your values, your motivations, and your personal desires. And so what you can do is use this schematic of the nested circles as a brainstorming tool to find those points of alignment between you, your experiences, the fellowship program, and the funding agency. And these points of alignment will then become the grounding themes for your personal statements or research proposals. So what I definitely recommend that you do is actually just to write this explicitly out. So write out, after doing this research, after what we've talked about, incorporate what we've already talked about, the NSF and the intentions of the GRFP, and then add your experiences in research that align with those of the NSF and the GRFP, and then your motivations and values. And this will really, really help you in determining where to go with your statements. So before drafting any component of your application, and I mean any component of your application, you should always ask yourself the following questions. So start with, who is my audience? As much as you know about them. And remember, you won't know everything. You won't know exactly who these reviewers are, but you have a general idea that these are individuals who have an advanced graduate degree in STEM and have some vested interest in promoting the mission of the NSF GRFP. Ask yourself, what do they value? How can you align yourself? And what will they need? And the flip side of this is then, what will you as the writer need to provide? And so I want to just take a brief second just to have a reminder that you need to be nice to yourself, or that you should be nice to yourself during this process. So I just want to acknowledge that it's really easy to slip into a performative mode with these texts and try to look and sound like the kind of person that you think the NSF GRFP and the reviewers want. And it's really difficult to navigate the line between expressing alignment and doing this, because you are trying to persuade a reader who controls something that you want. So there is very much an imbalance in the power dynamic that's occurring, because what you would really like is the resources to pursue your graduate education. And the NSF GRFP has this, and you know that you need to persuade them, but you don't exactly know how. And so, if, or rather when, because for most people this is true, when it feels icky, what we recommend that you do instead is switch your focus to simply expressing yourself authentically. And then, after you express yourself authentically and express your motivations, goals, and values authentically, then you can go back to the text to signal your alignment during the revising process. So that's one option that you can use if this feels particularly icky, or if you feel that you're slipping into this performative mode that will actually hurt you in the end by making your application sound less authentic and genuine, which therefore makes it less engaging and compelling to the reader and reviewers, even if they can't pinpoint exactly why that is the case. So there's two merit review criteria that NSF uses for all their proposals, including the NSF GRFP. And these merit review criteria are that of intellectual merit and broader impacts. And so intellectual merit is the ability to advance the state of knowledge in your discipline. With broader impacts, it's the ability to benefit society and or achieve certain desired societal outcomes. Both of these two things need to be referenced explicitly in their own subsections. And this is a relatively new thing in the NSF-GRFP, that you need to have specific subsessions for both the personal and the research statement. And these need to be incorporated in both of these statements. Otherwise, your application runs the risk of being returned without review, or being rejected because you have not followed these instructions. So go back to the solicitation and check this, but these are two important things that they will mention again and again that you need to include, which is the intellectual merit and broader impacts for both your personal and your research statements. And so what you can do to sort of express these, so what intellectual merit sort of entails in the sense of the personal statement is that you have the qualification, experience, and motivation to carry out your proposed research and advance knowledge. In the context of the research statement, it's that your research is well situated in your field of scholarship and has the potential to creatively expand knowledge within that field or STEM as a whole. And broader impacts and the personal statement, you signal this, or what it means is that you are interested in and motivated to leverage your research experience to the benefit of others in society. And what this means in the context of your research statement is that your activity can ultimately be leveraged for the benefit of others or achieve a specific desired societal outcome. And I say activity, not research, because it can be one or both of these. So your research itself may not be a broader impact, but within the context of your research project, you could do things like conducting outreach, or working with local organizations such as museums to enhance STEM education within your particular topic for your research proposal. But essentially, whatever activity you've put within your research statement can ultimately be benefit or leverage for the benefit of others, and to achieve these specific desired societal outcomes, which I recommend you look for the NSF, but we'll talk about those in a little bit. That said, now that I've just reviewed intellectual merit and broader impacts, don't get too caught up in these merit review criteria just yet. Just like the other things, always start off with this alignment schematic. So start looking at the agency, the fellowship, your experiences and research. So start off just looking at the NSF GRFP website, learn more about the GRFP, learn more about past applicants or what they're looking for in applicants, and then go back to the merit review criteria. And so for those in the synchronous section, we took a few minutes to visit the website links and work through the alignment diagram. For those of you who are in this watching this asynchronously, I highly recommend pausing the video now and just taking a few minutes to visit these website links and work through the alignment diagram for yourself. And as you're doing this, write down, and it might feel a little cheesy, but I promise it's helpful. Write down who is the audience, what do they value, how can you align yourself, and how might you incorporate themes within your statements to align yourself, and what will you need to provide. So just pause here, and I ask that you do the following. Welcome back. So here we're going to go over the personal relevant background and future goals statement. So the personal relevant background and future goals statement, which I'll shorten to personal statement, is where you get to tell your personal story. And so what NSF says that they want you to do is to demonstrate your potential for STEM research through experiences, both personal and professional, that have contributed to your motivation and preparation for pursuing a STEM career. This includes previous research, industry and professional experience, and includes your career aspirations and future goals, as well as how your experiences have shaped your goals. And remember that you must clearly address NSF's merit review criteria, that of intellectual merit and broader impacts, under separate headings now. And so I've included in the list of resources sample statements from multiple levels, from that of academic level 1, the senior undergrad, and academic level 2, so graduate students early in their graduate career. And you might notice as you're looking through these resources that the selection of sample applications that we have is heavily focused on oceanography, biology, and chemistry. So we're definitely, as the Writing Hub, looking for additional sample statements. So in future years, when you apply, we would absolutely love for you to send us sample statements so that we can continue providing these workshops and provide a broader resource base for people to look at. And so remember that there, as you're writing this or working on this, there is no perfect statement or right combination of words. So each of these statements that I have provided for you will have things that they did well or successfully, and some maybe not so well or not successfully. So as you read, and I think this is true for reading any sample statements, including those you find online, even if they list them as successful or unsuccessful, ask yourself, how did the writer align themselves with the fellowship and the funder goals? And then how did the writer incorporate the 2 merit review criteria, that of intellectual merit and broader goals? And so remember, I think it's very easy to fall into a trap when you're looking at sample statements, and especially if you're looking at just one sample statement, to think that you need to mimic the structure, or because, well, this sample was successful, that if I follow what this person did, I will also be successful. But remember that what the NSF is doing with the GRFP is they're really funding people, not funding projects. And that means that they use this holistic review process. So these statements are being evaluated in the context of the whole application package. And so if you're just looking at the statements, and I think it can be really easy if you're trying to use the statements or other sample statements as a guide to slip into that performative role. And it's much easier just to, if you feel like you're doing that, or you are getting anxious as you're looking at other people's sample statements, to go back to the schematic of the nesting circles and go back to trying to talk about your experiences authentically and aligning yourself authentically and presenting yourself and the themes that you want to convey that way. And so here are the links to a couple of the sample statements, but I will also include these links in the resources page. The next statement is the graduate research statement. And so this is explicitly where you'll describe your proposed research plan, where you'll communicate your research idea and approach, explain your research plan and methods, talk about what you expect to learn, how you'll know if the project is successful, and what you'll do next. You can also use this as an opportunity to say what you might do if the results of your proposed research plan don't work out the way that you expected them to, or if you get results contrary to what you hypothesize. And having these backup plans can sometimes show reviewers that you've thought this through and thought about the alternatives that might occur as you conduct your research. Some pointers from the NSF that they include is to avoid jargon. And the reason for this, not only does jargon affect the clarity of our writing, and so for the ability of readers to review the writing, but also remember that your review panel is the only guarantee is that they're going to be in your very broad section. So say you're doing atmospheric chemistry research, the only guarantee you would be applying under the chemistry program is that your reviewers would be chemists, but they probably will not, although they may be in your particular subspecialty. So it's really important to avoid jargon. And if you introduce acronyms to spell out and describe what these things mean. So it's really important to communicate clearly for non-specialists and make your contributions within the research very clear. And again, like in the personal statement, you need to clearly address NSF's merit review criteria, so both the intellectual merit and the broader impacts under separate headings. And so just like for the personal statement, I've provided sample research statements, one at the level of the senior undergraduate and one at the level of the early career graduate student, so somebody who's already in graduate school. And again, ask yourself these questions. So how did the writer incorporate the 2 merit review criteria? What elements did you find successful? And then what elements did you perhaps find not so successful? And so these are the links to the 2 statements that I've included, and they'll also be available on the resource list. For the synchronous session, as I said in the beginning, we did a variety of breakout groups and activities depending on what people chose that they wanted to do. And I'll provide you my recommendation of where I think you might want to start. So if you're really new to the NSF GRFP, maybe this is something you've heard about, or maybe you haven't heard about it and you just want to know more about it, again, work on exploring the opportunity. So read the solicitation and review the NSF website materials. None of this will be wasted time, I promise you. If you're not yet in the stage or you're just starting the stage of drafting your statements, perhaps you might want to look at additional example statements and then explore principles for writing these statements as well as the alignment in depth. And so I'll provide in the resources worksheet some additional example statements that you can work through and see. And I do think it is helpful to look at a variety of samples if you have the time and are have the ability to look at them, because I think one of the things that you realize the more sample statements that you look at is that there is such a variety in terms of how people present themselves and how people tell their story and the proposed research projects, that I think it's actually really freeing and empowering, because it really frees you up to focus on telling your authentic story and shows you how others and how the ways that they've done that, there's just so many different paths you can take. So for those who are applying this year, so that means in the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks, perhaps, you have to turn your statements in. We had an opportunity for peer review. Don't worry, I think you can still have plenty of resources at your disposal for doing a peer review. So I've made a separate brief recording of guidelines for eliciting effective peer review, as well as like what you should be looking for, or if you're reviewing, some of your friends' applications at the same time, that you're writing to NSF, how you might do this and provide them with an informed reader's feedback. And so if you're in this group, what I would recommend that you do is pause and just move over to that video, and look over the guidelines for effective peer review, and then use your resources and see if there are anyone around you, whether they're other fellow undergraduates, graduate students, people in your lab, your potential advisor, your current research advisor, and just ask for some advice and feedback on your research or on your statements. So this is the moment for those with statements to pause and move to the companion recording with the brief guide to effective peer review. These are the links for the first group. So for those who want to learn a little bit more about the NSF GRFP, the links to the current solicitation for 2020, as well as a tutorial that the NSF GRFP has put together for the application. These are the links to the additional research statement and personal statements at different academic levels. And these will again be included in the resource sheet. And then I've put together a longer resource list. So I know I've put this multiple times throughout the course of this workshop, but always go back to the GRFP website. They have some really great resources and tutorials there. It's worth looking at, just to see what NSF picks out as the most important things in terms of their missions and values that they want to communicate. There's a couple other websites here. One is a former successful NSF GRFP recipient, Mallory Ladd and Alex Hunter Lang, and they include their own advice, which always there's plenty of advice out there, so always take everyone, including my advice, with a grain of salt. But it is sometimes helpful to see what other people think or what their experiences were like. And some of these websites have pretty large lists of sample essays if you want some different essays to look at. Science, in the Science magazine, an NSF staff member wrote a brief article on hints and common mistakes for NSF proposals. And so these are for just any NSF proposal at any stage. So you'll notice there'll be some common mistakes or hints that are not relevant for the GRFP, but many of them are. And so it's worth taking a look at. One of the things that they pull out is that people, even advanced researchers or professors, don't necessarily have a really good understanding of what the NSF is looking for with broader impacts. So I highly recommend reviewing when you're looking at the NSF website. NSF actually lists examples of the different types of broader impacts. And it's tricky. I'll definitely acknowledge that it's tricky because there are so many different ways that you uniquely can demonstrate broader impacts. And there may be ways that they don't list, and you don't have to feel like you have to do all of them or even many of them. But do try to understand what NSF means by broader impacts so that you can incorporate them appropriately in your statements. And so that's the end of the formal slides for our workshop. And so I wanted to offer opportunities to keep it going. So don't think of this as the end. So there are plenty of things that you can do from now on. So you can form a writing and peer review group with others in your cohort. I see I wrote review twice, so might need your peer review cohort to review that, to provide each other supportive readers' feedback. And so go back to those guidelines that I gave you for effective peer review and use these to help guide the peer review within your group. And sometimes it's helpful to set up drafting deadlines and hold each other accountable. Often there's this friction, I think, in starting some of these things. And so if you can get past this friction, it's very helpful. Another thing that you can do is make a writing consultation appointment. And so you must use the appropriate schedule. So if you're an undergraduate, or if you're an undergrad, current undergrad, you must go and see an undergrad writing consultant. And we have many amazing undergrad writing consultants to brainstorm ideas and get feedback as you go. Or you can make an appointment if you're a graduate student with a graduate writing consultant. And there are many excellent graduate writing consultants as well. You can also, if you're a graduate student, make time to write at the daily graduate writing room, which is held Monday through Friday from 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific time. And this is a really wonderful group where we use sort of soft accountability so that you can sit in the chair and write with each other. At the beginning, you list your goals to keep yourself accountable. And at the end, we come back and review how the session went. You can also, in that time during the daily graduate writing room, we request really short consultations with whoever the graduate writing room facilitator is. So this is an opportunity if there's like a particular paragraph or something that you want quick feedback on, that you could get quick feedback without doing a full appointment with a graduate writing consultant. And so as a reminder, this is a list of resources that the Writing Hub offers and what the values and the mission of the Writing Hub are. So at the Writing Hub, we help writers not writing. We build networks of support around writing and work to cultivate your sense of agency and self-efficacy through fostering positive and sustainable writing practices. And so in service of this, we offer one-on-one consultations with trained peer consultants. These are really wonderful for getting really excellent trained peer review. And each of our consultants sort of has their own style that you can benefit from. We have the daily virtual writing room, graduate writing retreats, the dissertation writers workshops, as well as weekly graduate writing workshops, of which this is one. And so, as I said early on, we want your feedback. Your feedback and your voice is really important. And these workshops are being regularly revised and updated based on the student feedback. So even if you're in the asynchronous session watching these slides now, please, please, please just go to this website. It's a very short form. It should take you no more than 5 minutes to fill out. Because we do hope to offer this workshop then again in the winter or spring quarters, and it would be really helpful to know what you would find most helpful in a workshop on NSF GRFP. So we look forward to working with you, and good luck to everybody working on their NSF GRFP applications. And for those of you moving forward, I wish you all luck and hope to see you in the writing rooms and writing consultations. Okay. Bye.